It was a Friday night, the kind where the air in rural Georgia still held the lingering warmth of summer, even as the sun dipped below the horizon. For 17-year-old Kayla Barnes, the promise of a ride home from the Waffle House on the outskirts of town was a simple, familiar comfort. She texted her mom, ready to be picked up, her fingers typing under the bright, almost harsh, yellow glow of the diner's sign. This was the last anyone would hear from Kayla directly. The Waffle House parking lot was usually a hub of activity on a Friday night. It served as a common late-night refueling stop for truckers on the interstate, a place for local teenagers to gather, and for some, a spot to grab a bite after a late shift. The area was well lit, the fluorescent lights from the diner and the neon signs of adjacent businesses casting long shadows that were, paradoxically, a form of unwelcome clarity. Yet, amidst this visibility, Kayla vanished. 8 years would pass. 8 years of unanswered questions, of fading hope, of a case file growing thicker with dead ends and colder with each passing season. Kayla's disappearance gnawed at the community, a stark reminder of how easily someone could be swallowed by the night. Then, in a twist of fate that felt as improbable as it was chilling, a dusty plastic bin in a storage auction unit miles away would upend everything investigators thought they knew. The storage unit, repossessed due to non-payment, was a treasure trove of forgotten belongings. But buried deep within, beneath camping gear and faded heirlooms, lay a box that held secrets far darker than its dusty exterior suggested. It contained a collection of Polaroids, relics of a past that felt disturbingly present, and one image, in particular, would send shockwaves through an investigation that had long gone cold. The photograph was stark, unsettling. It showed a teenager, her face contorted in fear, bound and gagged. The room was nondescript, dimly lit, offering few clues, but it was the girl's eyes, wide with terror, that were the most arresting. They held a silent scream, a plea for help lost to the years. Superimposed on the back of the photo, scrawled in faded ink, were just a few chilling characters. K17GA. The girl in the photo bore an uncanny resemblance to Kayla Barnes. This single Polaroid, found by chance, ignited a forgotten fire. Investigators, long since having filed Kayla's case away as a tragic mystery, were forced to confront the agonizing possibility that her disappearance was not what it seemed. The yellow glow of the Waffle House sign, once a beacon of routine, now seemed to symbolize a departure into an unimaginable darkness. The journey into that darkness was just beginning, and the path ahead was fraught with peril and the specter of widespread horror. And real quick before we move to Chapter 2, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more stories just like this. Now let's keep going. The disappearance of Kayla Barnes from a seemingly safe, well-lit Waffle House parking lot in rural Georgia sent a chilling ripple through the small community and launched an intense, immediate investigation. Detectives from the local sheriff's office, along with state investigators and FBI agents, descended upon the scene. Their initial efforts were laser-focused on the immediate surroundings, meticulously scouring every inch of the parking lot for any discarded item, any scuff mark, any trace of what might have happened in those critical minutes. A primary tool in their arsenal was the security footage. Businesses neighboring the Waffle House had cameras positioned to capture activity on the main road and parts of the parking lot. Detectives painstakingly gathered every available recording, creating a timeline of events leading up to and immediately following Kayla's last known moments. They reviewed hours of grainy footage, searching for any vehicle of interest, any suspicious figures, or any sign of Kayla interacting with anyone unknown. However, the digital eyes of security cameras proved to have significant blind spots. Between the coverage of 2 crucial cameras, an investigative team discovered a startling gap. It was a 17-minute window where their view of the primary area where Kayla was last seen walking toward the road was completely obscured. This wasn't a minor oversight. It was a void large enough for a person to vanish. Kayla was last seen on camera walking from the Waffle House towards the edge of the parking lot, presumably heading to the spot where her ride was expected. Her mother, who had received Kayla's final text, was reportedly only a few minutes away. But Kayla never reached the angle of the camera that would have captured her exit from the lot. She simply disappeared from view during that critical 17-minute gap. Based on the available footage and the circumstances, investigators quickly formed a working theory. Kayla had gotten into a car. The lack of any signs of a struggle, no screams reported by other patrons, and a steady walk towards the road supported the idea that she might have believed she was meeting someone she knew, or perhaps someone who had convinced her to get in their vehicle. But this theory immediately raised a cascade of troubling questions. Whose car was it? The 17-minute blind spot meant they had no visual confirmation of any vehicle entering or leaving that specific area during the crucial window. Was it a prearranged pickup? Had someone intercepted her? The absence of any obvious struggle on the existing footage was deeply concerning. If she was abducted, it was carried out with chilling efficiency, suggesting a degree of premeditation or a level of coercion that left no outward signs on camera. Furthermore, the question of voluntariness loomed large. Did Kayla get into the car willingly? If so, why did she never reach her intended pickup or contact her mother afterwards? The lack of any distress signals before she disappeared from camera view, coupled with the complete cessation of communication, fueled investigators' fears that whatever happened, it was not a simple case of a teenage girl deciding to take a spontaneous detour. This absence of evidence for voluntary departure was a grim indicator, suggesting darker possibilities were at play. The 17-minute blind spot became a focal point of the investigation, a metaphorical black hole where Kayla Barnes seemingly ceased to exist in any discernible way. It was a cruel twist of technology, a gap in the record that allowed a terrifying unknown to fester, deepening the mystery and fueling the desperate search for answers. As days bled into weeks and then months, the official investigation into Kayla Barnes' disappearance continued, grappling with the frustrating lack of concrete leads generated from the initial scene. Detectives interviewed Kayla's friends, teachers, and family, piecing together a portrait of a vibrant teenager whose life seemed poised for a bright future. Their accounts painted a consistent picture. Kayla was not the type of person to run away, especially not without a word. Friends spoke of her recent achievements, her excitement about making the Waffle House, the cheerleading squad, a significant accomplishment that brought her immense pride. She had been actively planning college visits, poring over brochures, and discussing potential majors with her guidance counselor. These were the dreams and aspirations of a girl firmly rooted in her community and enthusiastic about her path forward. The idea of her voluntarily departing, leaving everything behind, seemed utterly incongruous with the person they knew. Despite this strong consensus from her peer group, investigators couldn't entirely disregard the possibility of an impulsive decision, however unlikely. Rumors began to swirl, whispers that would be meticulously followed up on, only to dissolve into further speculation. There were whispers of an older boyfriend, someone mysterious who had caught Kayla's eye, though no one could definitively name him or describe him with any accuracy. This vague lead, like so many others, evaporated upon closer examination. Another thread that investigators pursued involved a suspicious truck seen in the vicinity around the time of Kayla's disappearance. Witnesses described a dark-colored pickup, perhaps an older model, lingering near the Waffle House. However, in a rural area with considerable truck traffic, identifying a single vehicle without more specific details proved to be an almost impossible task. It was a fleeting image, a shadow in the periphery of collective memory, offering no solid footing for the investigation. Then came the unsettling reports of a prank call. Someone claiming to have Kayla contacted the local authorities, offering cryptic messages that seemed designed to mislead and confuse. These calls were frustratingly devoid of verifiable information, serving only to heighten the anxiety of Kayla's family and the investigators. Every potential lead, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, had to be chased, even if it led down an exhausting path of dead ends. Amidst the interviews and the chasing of these elusive leads, detectives meticulously examined Kayla's digital footprint. Her phone records, her social media activity, her text messages, they were all scrutinized for any hint of a plan, a secret rendezvous, or a distress signal. It was within these digital communications that a subtle, yet unsettling, anomaly began to surface. While many of Kayla's messages were typical teenage chatter, a few exchanges, when reread with the grim context of her disappearance, felt off. There was a subtle shift in tone, a guardedness, an indirectness that hadn't been there before. Was it burgeoning independence or something more? Investigators were looking for a clear narrative, a sudden break from her established life, and these peculiar nuances in her digital conversations offered no easy answers, only more questions that gnawed at the edges of their theories. The investigation felt like trying to grasp smoke. Every tangible lead seemed to dissipate as soon as it was touched, leaving behind only residue of what might have been. The friends insisted she wouldn't leave, yet the lack of evidence for foul play, coupled with the eerie silence from Kayla herself, left a confusing void. This unsettling ambiguity, the feeling that something vital was being missed, began to weigh heavily on everyone involved. The passage of time is a cruel adversary in any missing persons case. As the years wore on, the initial urgency that gripped the community surrounding Kayla Barnes' disappearance began to wane for some. The media spotlight dimmed, the frequent search parties ceased, and the town gradually settled back into its routine, albeit with a permanent, aching void. But for Kayla's mother, the passage of time meant something entirely different. She never changed her phone number. It was a simple, yet profound, act of enduring hope. It was a silent, unwavering declaration that she was still waiting, still listening for a call that might never come. The number was a direct link to her daughter, a lifeline she refused to sever, no matter how bleak the circumstances became. In Kayla's bedroom, a light was always left on. It was a beacon in the darkness, a symbolic promise that her room was waiting, her life was on pause, ready to resume the moment she returned. This small, consistent ritual was a tangible manifestation of her mother's refusal to accept the finality of her daughter's absence. Her grief was a quiet, persistent presence in their home, a constant companion in the long, lonely nights. The case file found in the archives of the local sheriff's department grew dusty. The initial reports, the witness statements, the frustratingly few pieces of evidence, they settled into a familiar order, a testament to an investigation that had stalled. The town residents, having exhausted their theories and shared their sympathies, slowly began to stop asking the same questions, the weight of the unsolved mystery becoming too heavy a burden to carry indefinitely. But Kayla's mother, despite the quiet resignation of others, never truly gave up. She held on to fragments, to details that others might have overlooked or dismissed. One such detail, a technical blip in the vast digital silence surrounding her daughter's vanishing, offered a glimmer of possibility, however faint. It was a detail that she would often point to, a subtle anomaly in the otherwise complete cutoff of communication. Kayla's phone, in the hours after she was last seen, had pinged. Not near the Waffle house, not on the route home, but once, and just once, 5 miles north of the diner. The digital breadcrumb indicated a location at 1:18 a.m. and then nothing. The signal, which had flickered to life for a brief moment, blinked out entirely. This single, isolated ping was a puzzle piece that didn't seem to fit anywhere. Why would her phone be active briefly, miles away from where she was last seen, in the dead of night, only to fall silent forever? Was she moved? Was the phone being used by someone else? The location itself offered no immediate answers. It was simply a stretch of rural highway. This ghost of a signal, this momentary revival followed by eternal silence, became a focal point for her mother. It was the only tangible, albeit confusing, piece of information that suggested Kayla's story might have extended beyond the confines of that Waffle House parking lot. It was a tiny inconsistency in the otherwise perfect, terrifying blank slate of her disappearance, a whisper from the void that hinted at a journey or perhaps a forced displacement that remained shrouded in mystery. The mystery of that solitary ping, so far from where she was last seen, continued to haunt the narrative of Kayla's vanishing. It was a digital echo, a faint distress signal from an unknown location, serving as the sole, cryptic clue in a case that had otherwise gone completely cold, leaving a mother's heart suspended in an agonizing state of uncertainty. The years continued their relentless march, dulling the edges of the public's memory of Kayla Barnes. The case file, a monument to a young life lost and a mystery unsolved, gathered dust in a Georgia Sheriff's Department archive. The hope of finding Kayla, once a burning flame, had dwindled to a mere ember in the hearts of her family, flickering constantly against the harsh winds of time and unanswered questions. But in a twist of fate that defied probability, the embers would be unexpectedly fanned into a roaring inferno by a discovery made hundreds of miles away. In Opelika, Alabama, a public storage unit, long past its rental due date, was scheduled for auction. The contents, abandoned by a former tenant, were to be liquidated to recoup the unpaid fees. A man, drawn by the allure of a potential bargain or simply the curiosity of what forgotten treasures lay within, placed the winning bid on a nondescript, mid-sized locker. He set about the task of inventorying the contents, expecting to find perhaps old furniture, forgotten clothing, or the usual detritus of a life packed away and neglected. What he found, however, was far from ordinary. Beneath a pile of worn camping gear and weathered duffel bags, he unearthed a plain cardboard box, its exterior unassuming. His attention was drawn to its contents, which were an eclectic mix of old maps, faded travel brochures, and a collection of photographs. Most of the photos were innocuous, snapshots of mundane moments. But then he came across one image that sent an immediate chill down his spine. It was a Polaroid photograph, its colors slightly muted by age, but its impact undeniable. The image depicted a young woman, her eyes wide with an unspeakable terror. She was bound at the wrists and gagged, her head bowed as if in defeat, yet her eyes, fixed directly on the camera, implored a silent, desperate plea. The background offered little context, appearing to be a dimly lit, possibly unfinished interior space. The finder of the box felt an immediate sense of unease concerning the photograph. He then noticed some writing on the back, scrawled in a hurried hand. The inscription was brief, stark, and deeply disturbing. K17GA. The initials, the age, and the state abbreviation were a searing echo of a missing person case that had once gripped the news cycles in a neighboring state. The girl in the photograph bore an uncanny, heartbreaking resemblance to Kayla Barnes, the 17-year-old girl who had vanished from a Georgia Waffle House parking lot nearly a decade prior. The discovery was almost too coincidental to be believed. Could this be Kayla? The chilling image, so long hidden away, seemed to materialize out of the obscurity of time and distance, forcing a dormant investigation back to life. The man who won the storage unit auction, now holding what appeared to be evidence of a horrific crime, immediately contacted the authorities. The dusty box, once destined for obscurity, had become the improbable vessel carrying the potential key to a lost girl's fate and a terrifying new chapter in a long-forgotten cold case. The question of doubt would linger, but the visual similarity was too striking to ignore. Forensic analysis would be necessary, of course, but the immediate impact of that Polaroid, found in a random storage unit auction, was profound. It was a ghost from the past, a chilling testament to a hidden life, and an undeniable spark that reignited the hope and the fear that Kayla Barnes might still be found. The Polaroid photograph, unearthed from its slumber in a dusty storage unit in Opelika, Alabama, became the immediate focal point for an invigorated investigation. Its discovery was a seismic event, jolting the dormant case of Kayla Barnes back into the harsh light of day and immediately engaging federal resources. The FBI, alerted to the potential significance of the image, swiftly dispatched a team of forensics experts to meticulously examine the photograph and its accompanying materials. The initial analysis focused on every discernible detail within the chilling image. Forensic technicians painstakingly magnified the photograph, meticulously analyzing the background elements. They identified characteristics that suggested an unfinished basement, bare concrete floors, sections of exposed piping, and the stark presence of a black tarp draped over what could have been stored items or perhaps a makeshift surface. These mundane details, when viewed through the lens of the captive girl in the frame, took on a deeply sinister significance. The environment depicted in the Polaroid was not unique. Within the same box of photographs found in the storage unit, investigators discovered other images. These additional Polaroids depicted different young women, captured in similar settings characterized by the same unfinished basement atmosphere, the same stark tarp, and the same general sense of confinement. The recurring visual motifs painted a grim picture, suggesting a consistent modus operandi. As the FBI circulated these images and descriptions, a chilling pattern began to emerge. Through connections with law enforcement agencies in neighboring states, investigators identified several of the unidentified girls in the photographs. Tragically, 2 of them were confirmed to be young women who had been reported missing from other southern states in years prior. Their disappearances had been treated as separate tragedies, but now, in light of this new evidence, they were terrifyingly linked. The convergence of these individual cold cases pointed towards a disturbing, organized operation. The evidence strongly suggested a serial perpetrator or perpetrators who were abducting young women from different locations and holding them in similar environments. The consistency in the Polaroids indicated a deliberate, repeated pattern, a horrifying signature left behind by whoever was responsible. This was no longer just about finding Kayla Barnes. It was about unraveling a potential trafficking ring responsible for multiple disappearances and untold suffering. The implications were staggering. The storage unit, it seemed, was not merely a repository of forgotten belongings, but a potential cache of evidence, a silent witness to a series of abductions, and possibly worse. These photographs, once seemingly random snapshots, now served as a macabre gallery, each image a heartbreaking testament to a life put on hold, a future stolen. The discovery of the recurring settings and the recognition of other missing persons in the photographs amplified the urgency of the investigation exponentially. The timeline of these disappearances, now implicitly linked, stretched back years, suggesting a prolonged period of criminal activity. The question shifted from what happened to Kayla to who is doing this and how many victims have there been. The chilling realization that Kayla might have been one of many, a face among a collection of terrified individuals held captive, brought a new layer of horror to her already agonizing case. This evidence pointed not to a singular incident, but to a sinister, organized enterprise preying on vulnerable young women across the region. The investigation into the mysterious storage unit's contents led authorities on a complex and, at times, frustrating chase. The individual who had rented the unit, the one whose abandoned belongings had yielded the disturbing photographic evidence, had used a pseudonym. This immediate red flag signaled a deliberate attempt to conceal identity, casting a dark shadow over the initial findings. There were no verifiable records, no driver's license on file, and all payments for the unit had been made in cash, a common tactic used to obscure financial trails. Investigators immediately focused on the trail the renter had left at the storage facility itself. Security cameras at the rental office, while not the most sophisticated, provided the crucial visual evidence they needed. The footage revealed a tall man, his face partially obscured by a red baseball cap, appearing to be the one who had rented the unit. He was captured interacting with the rental agent, his demeanor appearing unremarkable, blending into the mundane transactions of daily life. However, the key piece of information obtained from the surveillance footage was the vehicle he used. The man was last seen leaving the premises in a white U-Haul van. The presence of the rental truck was significant. It suggested he had likely transporting the contents of the storage unit, or perhaps other items, to or from the location. Investigators immediately ran the visible license plate number of the U-Haul. The license plate search was a critical step, a potential gateway to identifying the man responsible for the chilling Polaroids. But the results of that query proved to be surprisingly and alarmingly complex. The license plate did not belong to an individual with a clean record, nor did it immediately point to a known criminal entity. Instead, it led investigators to a name that, at first glance, seemed out of place in a trafficking investigation. The plate was registered to a company that, upon deeper investigation, was primarily used by local churches and non-profit organizations for their various needs, including community outreach programs and volunteer transportation. This seemed peculiar, almost antithetical to the dark nature of the findings. Why would someone involved in such horrific activities be using a vehicle registered to an entity associated with good works? This unexpected registered owner would soon bring the investigation to a deeply personal and profoundly shocking intersection. A specific name within the company's roster, when cross-referenced with the limited information federal agents had compiled about individuals connected, however tangentially, to wider missing persons networks, began to stand out. This name was Elliot Welker. Elliot Welker was known in the local community. He was not a stranger, but someone who had been present during the darkest days of Kayla Barnes' disappearance. He was described as a longtime friend of the Barnes family. He had actively participated in the early searches. He had joined prayer vigils, offering comfort and support to Kayla's devastated parents. His involvement in the community and his apparent friendship with the family made his name's appearance in this context jarringly incongruous. The man in the red cap, the renter of the unit, the user of the U-Haul. Could this same Elliot Welker, the seemingly compassionate family friend who had participated in the search for Kayla, be connected to the terror depicted in those photographs? The investigators were confronted with a bewildering paradox, a deep disconnect between the man they thought they knew and the chilling evidence unearthed. The path forward was now fraught with emotional and psychological complexities, as the investigation turned its gaze inward, towards someone who had been on the periphery of their sympathy, not their suspicion. And what they would soon uncover on his very own property would shatter that perception entirely. The revelation that Elliot Welker's name was linked to the U-Haul used in connection with the storage unit was a jarring and deeply disturbing development. Welker, a man who had cultivated an image of compassion and community involvement, was now at the center of a federal human trafficking investigation. The initial disbelief among investigators was palpable. He had been a supportive presence for the Barnes family, a man seen comforting Kayla's mother, a face that had appeared in many of the local news reports seeking help for the missing teenager. Recognizing the profound implications, investigators moved with urgency. They sought and obtained a search warrant for Elliot Welker's property, a home situated in a quiet neighborhood, seemingly a world away from the grim realities suggested by the Polaroids and the storage unit's contents. The warrant was executed with the full weight of the federal investigation, the goal being to uncover any and all evidence that could corroborate or refute the disturbing links. The search of Welker's home was conducted with a meticulous, almost surgical precision. Federal agents systematically combed through every room, every closet, every corner of the property. The initial findings were unsettling. In the basement of the house, a space that investigators were particularly interested in due to the nature of the Polaroids, they discovered chilling evidence. Heavy steel chains, bolted securely into the concrete floor, were found. The presence of such restraints immediately conjured images of captivity and control. Further exploration of the basement revealed a removable floor panel. Beneath it, concealed within the subfloor, agents discovered more disturbing evidence. Strands of hair and a woman's earring. These were not merely random items, they were potential physical links to victims. The hair strands, in particular, were of immense interest, their DNA potentially holding the key to identifying who had been present in that hidden space. Forensic analysis was expedited. The results confirmed what investigators had feared. The hair strands belonged to Kayla Barnes. This was the definitive link the investigation had desperately needed, a grim confirmation that their prime suspect, Elliot Welker, had a direct and horrifying connection to the missing teenager. The earring was also being processed for any identifying markers or DNA traces that might tie it to another victim. But the discoveries in the wall insulation proved to be the most significant, shedding light on the origin of the disturbing Polaroids. Tucked away within the fiberglass insulation, agents found a collection of small, undeveloped film canisters and what appeared to be an old slide projector. These were not just random items. They were the means by which the Polaroids had been created. Welker, it seemed, had not just been a captor, but someone who meticulously documented his crimes, creating a disturbing visual record of his victims' suffering. The fact that Welker, a man who had offered solace and support to the Barnes family, was potentially responsible for Kayla's abduction and likely abuse, was a betrayal of the deepest order. It transformed the narrative from a stranger abduction to something far more insidious, a crime committed by someone within the victim's own social circle, someone who had exploited trust and manipulated sympathy. The evidence found within the walls of his home painted a clear, terrifying picture, suggesting that the horror had been hidden in plain sight, within the very community he had publicly supported in the search for Kayla. The forensic confirmation that the hair strands recovered from Elliot Welker's basement belonged to Kayla Barnes sent a shockwave of grim certainty through the investigation. This was no longer conjecture or a desperate search for a fleeting lead. It was concrete evidence directly linking Welker to Kayla in a place of undeniable confinement and abuse. The chains bolted into the floor and the discovery of her hair within the walls of his home painted a terrifyingly clear picture of her ordeal. The hidden compartment within the insulation, yielding not only the photographic materials, but also a collection of dated road atlases, offered an even more expansive and disturbing revelation about the scope of Welker's alleged crimes. Marked meticulously with a pen, these atlases revealed a complex network of highways and routes stretching across multiple southern states: Georgia, Mississippi, Tennessee, and Louisiana. The red ink traced paths that seemed to connect disparate rural areas, small towns, and points of interest. A chilling pattern began to emerge from these marked maps. Many of the marked exits and routes seemed to converge near specific types of locations. Isolated rest stops along highways, secluded truck depots, and seemingly insignificant rural crossroads. Some of these locations were further highlighted with small red stars, suggesting points of significance or repeated visits. This geographic mapping indicated a deliberate, methodical approach to his crimes, suggesting that these were not spontaneous acts, but planned operations. The investigators, now armed with this geographical data, cross-referenced the marked locations with databases of missing persons reports from the identified states. The results were horrifyingly consistent. In many of the towns and counties corresponding to the marked areas on Welker's maps, there were records of similar disappearances. Young women, often of similar age and demographic to Kayla, had vanished without a trace from these very same regions, their cases having long gone cold, lost in the vastness of unsolved mysteries. This discovery transformed the investigation from a singular case of abduction to the horrifying realization of a widespread, systematic operation. Elliot Welker was not merely an isolated offender. He was potentially a serial predator who had been systematically abducting and holding victims across multiple states for an extended period. The chilling patterns on the maps suggested a vast network of operations, with each marked location representing a potential crime scene, a place of captivity, or a drop-off point. The implications of this finding were monumental. It suggested that Welker had been operating under the radar for years, his carefully concealed activities leaving behind a trail of vanished lives. The seemingly random disappearances that had plagued various communities were now potentially being woven together into a single, horrifying narrative, all pointing back to one man's meticulously charted network of terror. The Polaroids were not just evidence of Kayla's suffering, but glimpses into a much larger, darker canvas of predation. The bravery of the individual who had discovered the storage unit and the meticulous work of the investigators had peeled back a layer of deception, revealing a predator who had been hiding in plain sight within the fabric of their own community. The evidence unearthed from Elliot Welker's property painted a grim picture of serial abduction. The marked road atlases were not just simple maps. They represented a carefully constructed operational blueprint for a predator who moved across state lines, leaving a trail of destruction. The patterns identified, small-town exits, rest stops, truck depots, all pointed to clandestine activity designed to be unseen and untraceable. Investigators immediately began to delve deeper into the digital realm, seeking any further traces of Welker's activities. They accessed recovered chat logs and explored hidden online forums frequented by individuals involved in illicit activities. It was within these shadowy corners of the internet that they found chilling accounts from women who had, against all odds, managed to survive similar abductions. These survivors, speaking anonymously through encrypted channels, described experiences that mirrored the horrors suggested by the evidence against Welker. One woman recounted her escape from what she described as a plaster-capped basement in Macon, Georgia. This detail resonated with the earlier forensic suspicions about an unfinished, tarp-covered room. Another survivor spoke of a captor who used biblical passages as a means of psychological control, a terrifying tactic often employed to manipulate and break victims' spirits. When the now infamous photographs of Welker began to circulate within these private networks, images captured from surveillance footage and early investigative releases, a profound and heartbreaking reaction occurred. One woman, seeing Welker's face, broke down into uncontrollable sobs, her trauma raw and palpable. She confirmed through her tears that that's him. Her identification was immediate and visceral, a testament to the profound terror he had instilled. But what she said next stunned the FBI agents who were monitoring the online communications. She identified him not just as a captor, but as someone she had known in a different context, someone who had previously seemed harmless, even kind. This confirmation of Welker's infiltration into the lives of his victims, his ability to foster trust before enacting unspeakable violence, was a particularly insidious aspect of his alleged crimes. Her words implied that his deception ran even deeper than they had initially imagined, striking at the core of societal trust. The recovered chat logs and survivor testimonies provided crucial context, humanizing the statistics and the forensic evidence. They spoke of fear, of methodical grooming, and of the brutal physical and psychological torment inflicted upon victims. The use of religious scripture as a tool of coercion was a particularly disturbing element, suggesting a twisted rationale behind his actions, an attempt to justify his abhorrent behavior through a perversion of faith. This information not only broadened the scope of the investigation, but also provided a more nuanced understanding of the predator they were dealing with. Welker's ability to blend into society, to gain the trust of families and communities, and to then exploit that trust for his horrific purposes, made him exceptionally dangerous. Each new piece of information, whether from the physical evidence or the digital whispers of survivors, served to solidify the terrifying picture of Elliot Welker as a calculating and prolific serial predator. The hunt for Kayla Barnes had inadvertently uncovered a vast network of suffering, and the whispers from the digital underworld were now echoing the silent screams of the missing. The relentless pursuit of Elliot Welker's activities led investigators to a rundown trailer home in rural Mississippi. This property, unlike Welker's established residence, was not directly linked to him through traditional ownership records. Instead, it was listed under a seemingly untraceable throwaway LLC, a common practice employed by individuals seeking to shield their assets and activities from scrutiny. The deliberate incorporation of a shell company immediately flagged it as a location of significant interest. Upon arrival, a palpable sense of dread permeated the air. The trailer home was abandoned, its windows boarded, its paint peeling, yet a faint, persistent odor of bleach still lingered. The smell of bleach, a potent disinfectant, often indicates an attempt to erase evidence, to scrub away any traces of foul play. Agents secured the perimeter and cautiously entered, their senses on high alert for anything that could further illuminate Welker's dark operations. Inside the desolate trailer, the grim discoveries continued. More Polaroids were found strewn about, some appearing to be newer than those discovered in the Alabama storage unit. These images, captured in what appeared to be similar grim settings, suggested the ongoing nature of Welker's predatory behavior. Each photograph was a silent testament to a life stolen, a future extinguished, adding to the mounting evidence of his monstrous crimes. Among the decaying possessions, investigators found a diary. Painstakingly written by one of the victims, it was a raw and unfiltered account of her captivity. The diary documented names of other girls she had encountered or heard about during her ordeal, victims of Welker's depravity. This provided investigators with a desperately needed roadmap, a way to identify and potentially locate other missing individuals, some of whom might still be alive. One name that appeared in the diary, a young woman still listed as missing in Georgia, immediately caught the attention of the investigators. Her case, a cold one from 2009, was eerily similar to Kayla Barnes' disappearance in terms of age and location. This connection, documented by a former victim, further solidified the theory that Welker's crimes spanned years and potentially multiple unrelated missing persons cases that had previously baffled law enforcement. But the trailer held another crucial item, a single, tarnished key. This key, unassuming in its appearance, belonged to a public storage unit that was still on Welker's ledger. It had not been paid for in years, suggesting it had been abandoned when Welker moved on, its contents left behind like discarded remnants of his victims' lives. This unpaid account, a forgotten financial obligation, now represented a physical location, a potential treasure trove of evidence waiting to be unlocked. The key was a physical link to another hidden space, another place where Welker might have stashed his trophies, his secrets, or perhaps even the remnants of his victims. The discovery of the trailer, the diary, and the key collectively represented a significant advancement in the investigation. It provided not only more evidence of Welker's depravity, but also concrete leads to potentially undiscovered victims and locations. The abandoned trailer, with its lingering smell of bleach and scattered photographs, served as a chilling reminder of the meticulous and prolonged nature of Welker's crimes, a testament to his ability to operate in the shadows for so long. The key recovered from the abandoned trailer home in Mississippi proved to be the next critical piece of a disturbing puzzle. It unlocked the door to a public storage unit in Birmingham, Alabama, a facility that hadn't been accessed in nearly 7 years. The unit itself was a chaotic jumble of forgotten items, thick with dust and cobwebs, a stark reflection of how long it had been untouched. It was a time capsule of secrets, meticulously preserved in neglect. After carefully navigating through the debris, investigators discovered a steel filing cabinet, its drawers tightly packed. The cabinet itself seemed out of place amidst the usual assortment of stored personal effects, hinting at its particular importance to the unit's former tenant. Inside, the findings were both devastating and potentially illuminating. Among the yellowed documents and forgotten trinkets, agents found Kayla Barnes' learner's permit. The discovery of her identification within this unit was a gut-wrenching confirmation of her presence, a tangible link to her ordeal years after her disappearance. Nearby, a ripped flannel shirt, its fabric faded and worn, lay crumpled, its origin and significance yet unknown, but adding to the growing sense of dread. But the most impactful discovery within that filing cabinet was one last Polaroid photograph. This image differed from the others found previously. In this photograph, Kayla appeared slightly older, her expression perhaps a shade less raw with terror, suggesting she had been held for a significant period. Crucially, she appeared to be alive in the photo. The visual evidence strongly indicated she had survived captivity thus far, a flicker of hope in the suffocating darkness of the case. Attached to the back of this final Polaroid was a handwritten note, its inscription stark and final. She saw the road but didn't make it. This cryptic message sent a fresh wave of fear through the investigators. It suggested that Kayla had almost escaped, had glimpsed freedom, but had ultimately failed to reach it. The note was deeply ambiguous, leaving open the most terrifying possibilities. The absence of any further evidence or indication of Kayla's current whereabouts, coupled with this chilling note, led investigators to fear the worst. Was this a confession of murder disguised as a prophecy? Had Welker taken her life after this moment of near escape? The note, so ominously vague, offered no reassurance, only deepening the mystery surrounding Kayla's ultimate fate. Despite the discovery of this extensive evidence, the chains, the hair, the Polaroids spanning years, the atlases, the diary, the learner's permit, the flannel shirt, and the final haunting photograph, there was still no body. There was no confirmed death certificate, no definitive proof that Kayla Barnes was no longer alive. She remained, technically, a missing person, her final fate an agonizing unknown, lost somewhere between the road she saw and the chilling finality of Welker's note. The case, even with this onslaught of evidence, remained a tapestry of shadows and profound uncertainty. The weight of years of investigation and the overwhelming trove of evidence unearthed, from the initial Polaroids in a storage unit to the chilling discoveries in Elliot Welker's home and the abandoned trailer, now rested on the shoulders of the district attorney's office. They faced a legal precipice of unprecedented complexity. Elliot Welker was in custody, charged with multiple federal counts of kidnapping and human trafficking, the evidence against him damning and extensive. Yet a crucial element remained conspicuously absent: the confirmation of Kayla Barnes' fate. The absence of a body, the lack of a confession from Welker detailing Kayla's final moments, and the ambiguous, yet hopeful, final Polaroid showing her alive, presented the district attorney with a profound dilemma. How could they rigorously prosecute a man for murder if they could not prove death? The legal system required concrete evidence, and while the proof of Welker's horrific deeds was undeniable concerning other victims, the ultimate conclusion for Kayla remained shrouded in agonizing uncertainty. With so many other victims identified, and with Welker's horrific pattern of behavior clearly established, the decision was made to proceed with federal charges that, while not directly murder, carried sentences that reflected the gravity of his alleged crimes. The charges were for multiple counts of kidnapping and human trafficking, offenses for which the evidence was overwhelming. The prosecution aimed to hold Welker accountable for the immense suffering he had inflicted, regardless of whether Kayla was ultimately found alive or deceased. During the highly anticipated trial, Kayla's mother sat in the courtroom, a silent, stoic figure bearing the immense weight of her daughter's absence. She had endured years of unimaginable pain, and now she was to hear the chilling details of the man accused of destroying her family. The prosecution meticulously laid out the evidence, presenting the recovered photographs, the forensic findings, the victim testimonies, and the incriminating maps. Then came the recordings. Recovered from Welker's hard drives, these audio files offered a deeply disturbing glimpse into his private world and his actions. The courtroom fell silent as the recordings were played, the low hum of the playback device amplifying the tension. The content ranged from chillingly mundane to overtly menacing, detailing his actions, his justifications, and his interactions with his captives. The courtroom was visibly shaken, the gravity of Welker's alleged atrocities laid bare through his own voice. But in the midst of the recordings, filled with Welker's own twisted narratives and the muffled sounds of his victims' terror, there was a different voice. It was not the voice of Welker, nor was it the voice of a victim speaking directly to him. It was a clearer, more distinct voice, that of a young woman whispering into a recording device, a desperate act of documenting her reality, a silent plea for help that might one day be heard. This voice, the prosecution argued, belonged to Kayla Barnes. Her mother, sitting in the front row, strained to listen, her heart pounding in her chest. The recordings were a harrowing journey into the abyss, but the clearest voice, the one that resonated with a desperate hope, hadn't come from Welker's depravity, but from Kayla herself, reaching out from the darkness, potentially years after she should have been lost forever. The audio recordings recovered from Elliot Welker's hard drives were a pivotal moment in the trial, a chilling testament to the horrors he had allegedly perpetrated. Among the static-filled files and Welker's own chilling monologues, one recording stood out with profound significance. It was the voice of a young woman, her words a desperate whisper against a backdrop of indistinguishable ambient noise, perhaps a distant hum or the creaks of an unknown structure. "Please tell my mom I'm okay. I don't know where I am," the whispered words pleaded, a fragile thread of hope in the overwhelming darkness. These words, spoken by a captive, were a direct message to the outside world, a desperate attempt to reach her family, to let them know she was alive, even in her dire circumstances. The raw emotion in her voice, the palpable fear, and the earnest plea for her mother's understanding were heart-wrenching. The prosecution presented this recording to the court, arguing that it was indeed Kayla Barnes speaking. To lend weight to their claim, they utilized advanced voice-matching artificial intelligence. This sophisticated technology analyzed the acoustic properties of the whispered recording and meticulously compared them to known audio samples of Kayla's voice. Specifically, recordings from her school years, likely obtained from school events or public records. The AI analysis yielded a striking result, a 90% match. This statistically significant similarity provided a powerful piece of evidence, bolstering the prosecution's assertion that the voice belonged to Kayla. It suggested that, even after years of captivity, Kayla had found a way to document her situation, to leave a trace of her existence, a testament to her resilience in the face of unimaginable adversity. However, the date stamp associated with this critical audio file introduced a perplexing and deeply unsettling paradox into the case. The file was dated 2021. This date placed the recording nearly 2 years prior to Welker's arrest and the subsequent trial, but crucially, it was over a decade after Kayla Barnes was originally reported missing in 2009. The implications of a 2021 recording were vast and profoundly complicated. If Kayla was alive in 2021, then the narrative of her disappearance shifted dramatically. It meant that she had survived her initial abduction for far longer than anyone had dared to hope. It proved she had endured years of captivity and potentially moved between various locations at Welker's command. But the most pressing and agonizing question that arose from this revelation was, where is she now? The 2021 recording offered a glimmer of hope that Kayla might still be alive, but it also presented a new, urgent mystery. If she was alive as recently as 2 years before the trial, what had happened to her in the interim? Had she escaped? Had she been moved again? Or, in the darkest possibility, had her luck finally run out? The whisper from 2021, while offering proof of her survival, left investigators and her family with an even more profound and urgent search. a race against time to find Kayla, who could still be out there, lost and alone. The trial concluded with a profound and heavy sentence for Elliot Welker. The federal court, faced with the overwhelming evidence of multiple kidnappings and human trafficking activities, delivered a verdict that underscored the severity of his crimes. Elliot Welker was sentenced to 160 years in federal prison, a sentence designed to ensure he would never again inflict harm upon another innocent individual. It was a monumental victory for justice, a culmination of years of relentless investigation and a testament to the courage of the survivors who had come forward. As a result of the extensive evidence and the testimonies presented, several other victims of Welker's depravity were identified. For some of these individuals, the long nightmare was finally over. They were located, identified, and through painstaking efforts, some were reunited with their families, offering a glimmer of hope and a measure of closure to families who had lived through years of agonizing uncertainty. These reunions, though often fraught with the trauma of what had transpired, represented the ultimate success of the investigation, the return of stolen lives. However, for Kayla Barnes, the story remained incomplete. Her face, once plastered on missing persons posters across the nation, continued to be a haunting symbol for a person still unaccounted for. Despite the conviction of her alleged abductor and the identification of numerous other victims, Kayla herself remained missing. Her physical whereabouts were unknown. Her fate, while strongly suspected, was not definitively confirmed through her presence or the discovery of her remains. Each year, on the anniversary of her disappearance, Kayla's mother continued to hold a vigil. The location remained the same, the Waffle House parking lot in rural Georgia where she was last seen. It was a pilgrimage of remembrance, a public demonstration of her enduring love and her refusal to forget. The vigil served as a quiet, yet powerful, reminder that the fight for justice was not truly over as long as Kayla was still missing. In the years following Welker's sentencing, the legend of Kayla Barnes continued to persist, fueled by the lingering hope that she might somehow still be alive. Strangers, moved by her story and the haunting question of her whereabouts, would report potential sightings in small towns scattered across a vast expanse, stretching from Texas all the way back to Georgia. These reports, though often unverified and based on fleeting glimpses, spoke to the enduring impact of her disappearance and the public's deep-seated desire for a redemptive conclusion. One such sighting, reported by a man in Memphis, Tennessee, described a brief encounter with a young woman in a bus station who bore a striking resemblance to Kayla. He claimed he had spoken to her, engaging in a brief exchange that solidified his belief that he had met the missing teenager. This report, like so many others, was investigated by local law enforcement. When police reviewed the surveillance footage from the Memphis bus station, they found the individual described by the witness. The woman on the tape did indeed bear a resemblance to Kayla Barnes, particularly in the hazy reflections visible in the glass storefronts. But as the investigators zoomed in, enhancing the grainy image, something peculiar appeared in the reflection behind the woman. It was a figure, a shadow of sorts, that seemed to linger just out of clear sight, a presence that was unsettlingly familiar, its form hinting at a likeness to Kayla, but it was not Kayla. Elliot Welker's conviction and subsequent sentencing to 160 years in federal prison brought a significant, albeit incomplete, measure of closure to a case that had haunted multiple states for years. The wheels of justice, though slow and arduous, had finally turned, holding a man accountable for a reign of terror that had spanned over a decade. The federal authorities lauded the collaborative efforts of agencies across the South, essential in piecing together the vast, interconnected web of Welker's crimes. The investigation did indeed lead to the identification of numerous other victims, some of whom had been tragically lost for years. The painstaking work of forensic analysis, survivor testimonies, and the meticulously gathered evidence from Welker's properties provided the key to unlocking identities that had been buried in cold case files and forgotten missing persons reports. For many of these families, the identification of their loved ones, and in some cases, their safe return, offered a profound, if deeply sorrowful, sense of resolution. Children were reunited with parents, siblings reconnected, and the devastating void left by their unexplained disappearances could finally begin to be addressed, allowing for a painful but necessary process of healing. Yet, amidst this wave of recovered lives, Kayla Barnes remained an anomaly, a ghost in the system. Despite the crushing evidence of Welker's crimes, and the possibility of her survival confirmed by the 2021 audio recording, her physical whereabouts were still unknown. Her face, once ubiquitous on missing person posters, lingered in the collective consciousness, a stark symbol of the one victim for whom no definitive end had been found. The case file, though bolstered by Welker's conviction, still held the agonizing question of Kayla's ultimate fate. Every year, the passage of time marked not just the continued absence of Kayla, but also the steadfast devotion of her mother. The vigil held annually at the same Waffle House parking lot in rural Georgia served as a powerful annual ritual. It was a silent, public declaration, a beacon of unwavering hope, and a poignant reminder that the story was not truly over as long as Kayla was still missing. This simple act of remembrance resonated with the community and drew continued attention to the unresolved aspect of the case. The enduring mystery of Kayla's disappearance continued to fuel speculation and occasionally reports from the public. Even years after Welker's sentencing, the possibility of Kayla being alive somewhere continued to resonate. Individuals in small towns across a vast geographical area, from the plains of Texas to the familiar landscapes of Georgia, would report sightings of a young woman who resembled Kayla. These tips, while often fleeting and difficult to verify, spoke to the persistent hope that she might have escaped and was living a new life, albeit one marked by profound trauma. One such report, originating from Memphis, Tennessee, described an encounter in a busy bus station. A witness claimed to have spoken with a young woman who bore a remarkable likeness to the missing Kayla Barnes. The witness was confident, believing he had interacted with her directly. Eager to follow any breadcrumb, law enforcement reviewed the available security footage from the bus terminal. The footage confirmed the presence of a woman matching the description. However, as investigators meticulously examined the grainy images, particularly through the reflections captured in the terminal's glass surfaces, something else emerged. Behind the woman who could have been Kayla, a subtle, almost spectral presence was visible in the reflection. It was a figure that shared an unsettling resemblance to Kayla, a ghostly echo of her likeness caught in the peripheral vision of the recording. But this figure, it seemed, was accompanied by another, a shadowy companion whose presence felt eerily familiar, yet indistinct. Was it Kayla, finally seen again after so many years, or was she still, somehow, not alone? The haunting image, captured in the reflection of the Memphis bus station surveillance footage, a ghostly echo of Kayla Barnes accompanied by an indistinct figure, did little to resolve the lingering questions surrounding her fate. It was a tantalizing glimpse, a flicker of possibility in the vast darkness of the unknown, yet it offered no definitive answers, deepening the mystery rather than dispelling it. The case, despite Welker's conviction and the recovery of so many other victims, still clung to the unresolved enigma of Kayla's ultimate disappearance. The federal authorities, having secured Welker's conviction for his extensive crimes, continued to follow up on any credible leads regarding Kayla's whereabouts. The information gleaned from the 2021 audio recording, however indirect, suggested she had survived for far longer than initially believed. This fact alone fueled the ongoing search, a desperate hope that she might still be alive, possibly hidden or living in hiding, fearing to reveal herself due to the trauma she had endured. Investigators compiled detailed profiles of Welker's known associates and the locations documented in his personal effects, searching for any overlooked connections that might lead back to Kayla. The impact of Elliot Welker's crimes extended far beyond the immediate victims and their families. His successful integration into communities, his calculated deception, and his ability to exploit trust served as a stark warning. Law enforcement agencies across the country re-evaluated their protocols for identifying and tracking individuals involved in human trafficking, particularly those who operated with such a sophisticated level of concealment. The case highlighted the profound danger posed by predators who could seamlessly blend into society, using their perceived normalcy as a shield for their horrific activities. Kayla's mother, though sustained by the knowledge that Welker was incarcerated, remained locked in a perpetual state of waiting. Her annual vigil at the Waffle House parking lot was more than a memorial. It was an act of defiance against despair, a testament to the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child. She continued to engage with missing persons advocacy groups, sharing Kayla's story, hoping that one day someone would recognize her or she would find the courage to reclaim her life. The legal ramifications of such prolonged and complex cases also became a subject of discussion among legal scholars and victim advocates. The challenge of prosecuting while a key victim remained missing underscored the limitations of the justice system when faced with profound ambiguity. While Welker was held accountable for his actions, the lack of definitive proof of Kayla's final disposition meant that a full measure of justice, in its most complete sense, remained elusive. The story of Kayla Barnes, therefore, continued to unfold, not in the courtroom or through definitive discovery, but in the lingering questions and the quiet persistence of hope. The image from the Memphis bus station, a mere reflection in glass, served as a spectral reminder, a whisper from the past that perhaps, just perhaps, Kayla was still out there, waiting for her own chance to be truly seen, to be truly free, and to finally bring an end to the agonizing uncertainty that had defined her existence for so many years. The investigation, in a sense, never truly closed. It simply shifted from active pursuit to a patient vigil, waiting for the day when the shadows might finally recede, revealing the truth. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story from us. We'll see you in the next one.